Hello everyone, my name is Danola Stanley and I'm here with Dr. Pramod Sasdac to talk to us today about brain health and stroke prevention. But before we start, Dr. Sasdac, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. I'm Pramod Sasdac. I'm an internal medicine specialist by training. I did my training back in India as well as here in the US. I worked for about 20 years at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center and retired a few years ago.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sasdac, for being here with us today
Sure.
to talk about brain health and stroke prevention. So, what is a stroke, Dr. Sasdac, and how does it affect our brain?
A stroke is a very serious condition and a very common condition at the same time in the society. A stroke or a brain attack occurs when there is compromised blood flow to a portion of the brain. There are blood vessels in the brain. For some reason, if a clot occurs there, the brain beyond that does not get any blood and it may die and cause symptoms in different parts of the body, such as slurring of speech, drooping of face, weakness of the arms or legs, and so on. Now, a stroke may occur for any of a couple of reasons. One, as I mentioned, is a clot blocking the blood flow. The other may be because the blood vessel ruptures or breaks, or blood may leak from a blood vessel. The leaked blood then causes pressure on the brain and decreasing the blood supply to that part of the brain. And again, that will lead to various symptoms. There is also a type of stroke called transient ischemic attack. As the name implies, these are transient. They may last for a minute or two or an hour or two, but certainly in less than 24 hours, the symptoms resolve completely.
Are there any warning signs of a stroke that we should be aware of?
A stroke occurs when a blood vessel is blocked, causing compromise in the blood supply to a portion of the brain. A blood vessel, which is like a tube or a pipe, may get blocked with a clot, and there is no blood flow beyond that. So that portion of the brain may die and cause symptoms in various parts of the body. In the face, there may be drooping. One side of the face may be lower than the other side. And if one looks at the angle of the mouth, it may be pulled down to one side. In the arm, there may be weakness. In the leg also there may be weakness, or the weakness may be in both arm and leg. A way to remember the symptoms and the action that is needed by most of us when we see someone developing a stroke. The word is FAST, F-A-S-T, and it's easy for us to remember. F is for facial droop, which I mentioned already. A is for arm weakness. If you ask a person to raise his or her arm, they will not be able to keep it up there and it will fall down, or they may not be able to raise it at all. S is for speech. Speech may be slurred, or there may be inability to speak. T is for time, which means time is of essence. What it really means is if you see somebody having stroke, or if you are developing one of the symptoms that we have talked about, you must get to the emergency room at once, or you must call the emergency services right away. The reason for that is there are medications that can be given to dissolve the clot, medications which are called clot busters. They are given in the vein, and the clot can be dissolved and the person may come back to normal. In other words, the symptoms that he had may go away completely. So it is very important that we take such a person to the emergency room right away. These medications, clot busters, may even be given up to 4 and 4.5 hours in certain cases, but in most cases, we prefer to give the medication within 3 hours. So once a person begins to have these warning symptoms, they must seek medical help urgently.
So, what are some risk factors for stroke?
Yes, risk factors are conditions which is very important for us to know. They are common conditions. Most of us are familiar with them. They are as follows: hypertension, diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol, smoking, physical inactivity, family history of stroke, and they are more common in males and in older age groups. The reason we pay attention to these conditions or these risk factors is because in all of them there is a greater incidence of what we call atherosclerosis. And atherosclerosis is referred to a condition where a small plaque forms, like a small plate, on the inside of the blood vessel. It is a mixture of various substances, calcium and fat and so on, which is deposited on the inside. And what that does is it narrows the lumen, the blood vessels, the pipe, so the blood flow is affected gradually. But usually symptoms do not develop until the narrowing becomes significant. So at that point, the person begins to have symptoms of stroke.
How can lifestyle choices impact our brain health and reduce the risk of a stroke?
Yes, lifestyle choices are the first line of treatment of the risk factors. We treat or address the risk factors in daily life because by doing so, we reduce the chances of a person developing stroke. So that is the reason for paying attention to these lifestyle modifications, as we call them. Now, the first thing is obviously paying attention to diet. Now, the first thing that we must do is eat a variety of foods, plant-based foods. But those who wish to eat meat, etc., must greatly limit the quantity that they eat and the frequency of their eating meat foods. Plant-based foods must be as they come in nature. In other words, whole foods eaten whole. That is the ideal. Because once you begin to chop them up or grind them, they undergo chemical changes which are detrimental to our health. And the food must be of a wide variety, as I said: fruits, vegetables, with particular attention to green leafy vegetables, nuts, grains, and avoiding meats or limiting meats, dairy, sugar, salt, stimulants, etc. The reason why we eat these plant foods is because they contain not only carbohydrates, proteins, and minerals, vitamins, etc., but they also have antioxidants. The body is constantly undergoing some damage in various parts, and these foods provide what we call antioxidants to reverse those changes. I once heard a Christian preacher, George Malcolmus by name. He had an interesting story. His mother developed colon cancer. She took chemotherapy, and after a few cycles of chemotherapy, her condition went downhill and she died of cancer. And it so happened that at the age of 42, George himself developed colon cancer, but he refused to take regular chemotherapy. Instead, he made changes in his diet, and the diet that he took was 100% raw foods. Now, it might be difficult for some of us to eat that kind of food, but that's what he did. And guess what? His cancer went away. So he became a very strong proponent of vegetarianism. And he started a place in North Carolina called Hallelujah Acres. And people still go there to learn how to eat right and live right. Now, he once said that there are 5 groups of foods which are poisons: meat, fats, dairy, sugar, and salt. Now, that's how he described them. And he also said that there was a group of Christian drugs, namely caffeine and alcohol. When it comes to diet and brain health, as I've stated, we must eat a wide variety of plant foods, and also at the same time avoiding those substances which are not good for us, namely the 5 quote unquote poisons. We must limit our salt intake. Whole foods must be eaten whole, and our food servings must be colorful. These colors represent various nutrients which are necessary for our body. Now, there is an idea that I would like to mention. We are not going to talk about it in detail, but fiber in foods is very important. Now, there used to be a time when we talked about eating fiber to control the blood sugar as well as to have our gut moving regularly. But there is a new concept that has come up in the last few years. Our intestines contain a lot of microbes, bacteria. These are called microbiota. And we eat these fibers and natural foods for the microbiota, because when we eat them, they are consumed by these bacteria, and they have a protective effect on our intestines and on the rest of the body. In fact, if our food is not right, the composition of the bacteria in the gut changes, and that leads to what is called leaky gut. So, harmful substances from the gut go into the bloodstream and affect various parts of the body. And if left untreated, leaky gut can lead to prolonged inflammation in the body, which in turn increases the risk of cardiovascular disease, stroke, and certain cancers. So, feeding the microbiota right is a goal of our dietary changes.
Are there any specific exercises or activities that can promote brain health?
Yes, there are exercises which promote not only well-being of the muscles, arms, legs, and trunk, but also of the brain. And these exercises which are recommended are called aerobic exercises, where there is alternate contraction and relaxation of opposing groups of muscles. Examples of such exercises are brisk walking, jogging, cycling, and swimming. Now, there are many benefits. One thing, they promote a sense of well-being by promoting the secretion of endorphins in the brain, which makes us feel good. We feel good about ourselves and the world around us. They also promote what is called collateral circulation. There is connections that are made between one blood vessel and another blood vessel. So, if for some reason blood supply decreases in one portion of the brain, blood comes from another portion of the brain to fill the need. The exercises must be have a goal, and one of the goals is to maintain a healthy body weight. Healthy body weight. Now, healthy body weight, we can find out from various charts, BMI tables, as to what our ideal body weight should be, which is between 25 and 29.9.
Can stress affect brain health and increase the risk of a stroke?
Most certainly. Stress can be mental as well as physical, and if it persists over a long period of time, it can cause changes in various parts of the body. Now, stress, when it is detected by the brain, causes signals to go down to the adrenal gland, which are small triangular glands like caps sitting on the kidneys, one on each side. And it secretes a hormone called epinephrine. Epinephrine increases the blood pressure as well as heart rate. And if it persists for a long time, it will lead to formation of atherosclerotic plaque in various parts of the body. Other than epinephrine, there is also another hormone called cortisol, which is secreted, which causes increase in blood sugar, weight gain, and increased appetite, which then leads to further weight gain. All these changes cause an increase in the inflammation in various parts of the body, which leads to tissue damage, including the lining of the blood vessels, and then that leads to stroke in the brain. What can we do to reduce stress? There are some general measures that have been recommended. One is a relaxation technique in which deep breathing is recommended. You take a deep breath and count how long it takes, and then you breathe out over a length of time which is twice as long as the time you breathe in. In other words, if you breathe in for 4 counts, you breathe out for 8 counts. Now you do that with the mouth closed and you breathe in and out through your nose. That has a relaxing effect. Other than that, you can expose yourself to soothing words or tranquil scenes. Either you can visit a place, a beachside, a mountaintop, a resort, or a garden, and so on. More important than these is one's religious experience. Prayer is very important if you believe in it, and that has a calming effect. For others, they report benefit from yoga, tai chi, and so on. Other than that, physical activity is very important. Regular exercise has a calming effect on the body as well as on the mind. Regular sleep is very important. One must have at least 8 hours of sleep regularly. Social support. Social support is very important in the family, in the community, in the church setting, and even in places of work. Relaxation also means avoiding certain situations where there is a lot of unnecessary excitement. And this may even include watching television, because television programs are geared to causing excitement. And if you happen to watch television just before it's time to go to sleep, you are unlikely to fall asleep right away. So it will interfere with your sleep and in the long run lead to stress. There was an experiment conducted at Massachusetts General Hospital in which 122 patients were studied. Half of them were taught relaxation technique. The other half were told about what to do about their blood pressure. After a period of 8 weeks, the group with relaxation technique was able to decrease their blood pressure by 5 millimeters of mercury, and in the second phase they were able to stop one blood pressure medication in more than 50% of patients, whereas in the control group only 19% of patients could stop the medication. Thus, we can see that relaxation is really very important in addressing the risk factors.
Can you provide some practical tips for us to use in preventing a stroke in our everyday lives?
Sure. Practical tips in preventing strokes really consist of addressing the risk factors, which we have already mentioned before, such as hypertension, diabetes, obesity, high cholesterol, physical inactivity, smoking, and so on. So the tips will be highly individualized. But in general terms, one can say that we must eat right, we must exercise right, and we must think right. By doing so, we will reduce the stress that we are all exposed to, and thus reduce the damage that occurs to different organs in our bodies.
How can we raise awareness about stroke prevention within our own community?
Actually, in this day of technology, it is very easy to raise awareness because there are public service announcements made on television, radio, and in various organizations. And in our families, and we all have access to phones. If someone suffers from stroke, we can let others know, and then thus awareness can be raised through the communication that we have one with another.
How can our faith or spirituality contribute to brain health and stroke prevention?
Yes, our faith or spirituality is very closely connected with our brain health and can lead to changes which will be helpful in stroke prevention. I'm aware of Christian faith which teaches us to trust in God. And that is the most important step that we can take, to trust in God. For the scriptures say in Isaiah 26:3, "You will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you, for he trusts you." So trusting in God completely, implicitly, leads to peace of mind. And once we have peace of mind, we are free from stress. Jesus himself said in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you, not as the world gives, give I unto you." And so we need to trust Jesus, who is our almighty Savior. In Luke 21:26, we are told that men's hearts may fail them for fear. So once we trust God, we have no need to fear, because in Romans 5, it tells us that the Holy Spirit pours His love into our hearts. And where there is love, there is no fear. And love turns our attention to God and to others. Stress occurs when we look at ourselves. Stress disappears when we look at God and look at others around us. In fact, there is an experiment that was done quite some years ago now by Dr. Andrew Newberg in University of Pennsylvania. He's a neuroscientist. He took a bunch of elderly patients with high blood pressure and suggested to them that they meditate on a God of love rather than a punitive God for 12 minutes a day. And after a month, they were found to have a decrease in their blood pressure, decrease in their pulse rate, and improved problem-solving ability. Prayer and medication cause permanent changes in the brain, which can be documented using MRI and so on. Love to man leads us to perform altruistic acts, doing good for others, and thus shifting the focus away from us. Altruism has been shown to have a lot of physical as well as mental benefits. We can never go wrong when we put our trust in God.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hansdack, for being here with us today to talk about brain health and stroke prevention. I'm sure everybody watching was blessed with everything that you talked about today.
Thank you.